Welcome in to the Husker247 Podcast. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz here on Wednesday morning. Bruntz, we are in the final week of spring football. Does it feel like the final week of spring football? Do you need another couple weeks of learning who these players are and coming up with questions for new people that don't immediately be my go-to of, so how's the transition going for you so far? I think I've only asked that 9 times out of the 11 interviews I've had this spring.
Yeah, it's like the spring football version of like talking about the weather, I feel like. It's
hot enough for you.
Yeah. Working harder, hardly working. I think the spring has been okay. Matt Rule wants like another 2 weeks. I don't think we need 2 weeks. But we haven't hit that point yet. And you know what I'm talking about. We're in the spring, it's like the 3rd or 4th week of spring. You're talking to people who are obviously spring stories that you likely will not be talking to in the fall. We haven't hit that point yet. And I think the fact that Nebraska added so many new people has helped kind of keep things fresh a little bit. And I'm eager to kind of see what this looks like. I think they want to play something resembling football if the offensive line allows. And I don't know. I mean, we'll get into this in the Hypecast, I'm sure, but you've got Frank Solich coming back. You've got a Herbie, the big Herbie glam up reveal. So there's a lot to do here.
No word on Little Red though, right? He sounds like he's gonna skate by.
Yes. Redesigned, apparently. I'll believe it when I see it. I hope they just figured out a way to make his hands less dirty. Like if you look at
Little Red's he's been redesigned.
Well, that was the thing. They changed the logo for the black shirts too. It used to be kind of like more of a side. You looked at it from the side, kind of like a 45, and now it's like straight on and a little bigger. And it was just a little throwaway line in the press release that Little Red had also been redesigned, but I don't think it's the actual like blow up doll Little Red. I think it's like just the
image,
the graphic. Yeah.
Yeah, with the stupid sideways hat and the number 1 finger and all that.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
Yeah. The other one wasn't visible on camera. Good catch. Good catch there. Okay, I created a game in my head while you were talking. I'm gonna throw some things at you, and you tell me whether it's a big deal, a spring deal, or doesn't really matter at all. Spring deal means it's just something we're going to be talking about this spring. Yep. You don't see it having an outsized effect on the season overall. So those are your responses, and we will start as we have to at the quarterback position. But we're going to start with Heinrich Haarberg. Is Heinrich Haarberg's ascension this spring a big deal, just a spring deal, or didn't really mean as much as we've spent time talking about it?
Heinrich Haarberg's kind of designed for this question, is he not?
Yeah. He is this question, really.
It's a big deal. I think it's a big deal.
I think it's a big deal.
I think Heinrich Haarberg is more in the mix than maybe what I would have expected at the start of spring. Marcus Satterfield talked yesterday. I think they like what he gives them as a potential runner. I think they like that he's big and physical and athletic, all the things that the staff looks for. And I mean, without Logan Smothers in there, without Casey Thompson in there, he's gotten a lot of work and right behind Jeff Sims. So I think it's a big deal. And I mean, you and I and Brian have talked about this a ton. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have talked about it, but I mean, there is attrition coming to the quarterback.
About those people, though.
What's that? No,
I don't care about their conversations or those people. Only us. Us always. That's the shirts we wear a lot of times.
Yes.
Husker247, us always.
Us always. It's his rise this spring makes that question a lot less daunting of who will leave and who will stay, in my opinion, because I don't think Matt Rule wants to have to get 4 quarterbacks ready when the season starts. Like, I think if he could get like 2 would be great, 3 even better, but I don't think he wants to go much farther than that. And I think that Heinrich Haarberg right now would be in that mix of these are the guys that we're getting ready to potentially help us. So big deal. Big
All
deal.
right.
I would
Heinrich
have said
Harburg,
I
big
would have said
deal.
spring deal earlier in the spring. Like when they started practice, I would have said spring deal, but I'm changing my tune.
Yeah. This has me excited. I don't know where you were with Heinrich Harburg, but I don't know if it was just the uniqueness of covering an in-state quarterback commit or what, but one, I have a good relationship with him. Two, I was always pretty enamored with just his physical tools. I mean, this is a guy that was a sprinter. He's a great athlete. He's got, if not the biggest arm on the team, like right there with Richard Torres and Jeff Sims. I think those are the guys that, those three are probably the ones that are going to be able to throw the ball the furthest, put the most pace on it, that kind of thing. And I just really, unique kind of athletic skill set. I wanted to see what that looks like. And last year was so bad for him, I think, in terms of even really having the opportunity to be developed, that he really, I think, needed this spring. I think the staff has kind of gone above and beyond making sure he feels comfortable. And I think they've really kind of answered the question that started this spring. Are you a quarterback? And it seems unequivocally to this staff, the answer is yes. Like, we don't have to talk about him playing tight end or linebacker or anything like that. He's going to play quarterback. And I think that's a big deal. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah, it's interesting too. I mean, like when you describe Heinrich Harburg, it's like, okay, that he is what this staff looks for. He's toolsy. It was just a matter of how was he going to be developed. And I mean, I don't think he's alone on this roster of guys that last year just essentially lost a year of development once the coaching stuff happened. Because what carrot is there for a coaching staff to continue to really develop guys farther down on your depth chart if there's huge questions about whether or not they're going to be there themselves? Like, I think that's just, that's the unfortunate part of the way things played out last year. I mean, you ended up with Matt Rule, so you're
Right.
feeling good about that. But I think he more than about anybody, I think, will really benefit from another kind of refocus on development.
Have you noticed that with the staff, the way we talk about players sometimes is a way that people would talk about transformers? Like, oh, he can do this and you can do that. And it's like, it's all part of that sort of positionless thing where it's like, oh, look how you can bend his arms and you can, it's just like this weird action figure that's super hyper versatile that can be converted into a sports car at a moment's notice. Like that's how we sort of end up talking about the guys that it feels like the staff really likes. And I wonder if that's just the way that it starts for them, or if we're still, 3 years into it, we're still referring to a lot of things as positionless and multiple and a versatile and all of those things. Like, sometimes I just feel like we're talking about a like action figure in a way.
I think as time goes on, it's going to continue to be. I mean, when you ask these coaches how they evaluate positions and what they look for, it's always traits and tools. Like that's not going to change.
Right. So transformers. That's
Transformers.
what Nebraska's recruiting. They're recruiting transformers. We
Optimus
should get
Prime.
we need to get like a graphic made so we can really own that thing. Otherwise, someone's going to steal this. All my good ideas get stolen.
Yeah,
So
your hard hat thing really took off.
I swear I invented that. And that was all me.
I invented the hard hat.
Yeah. I mean, not really the hard hat, but putting the sticker on it and walking the players through with the sticker. I mean, that was me. Let's give me some credit here. All right, enough about me. Moving on. Big deal, spring deal, no deal. Gabe Ervin finds another coaching staff enamored with his skill set.
I think it's going to be a big deal. I continue to believe that running back room is going to be a little bit of a not, I don't want to say by committee, but essentially by committee. Like you're not going to have an Amir Abdullah emerge from that running back room, but I think Gabe Ervin has tickled the fancy of this staff a little bit this spring with what he can do, and he, to his credit, has won the offseason pretty well. And it's just a matter of him putting it together in the fall, especially now that he's healthy. I don't know that he was particularly healthy and ready to go last year. So I will say big deal for Gabe Ervin. What say you?
I'm saying spring deal. I got to see him do it in the regular season. I mean, I have three
Who's it
other
going to
running
be?
backs.
Who's
What's
it
up?
going to be?
I don't know, but all the other three guys have more experience and more like reps and more production when it matters. Like I just have a tough time believing that Gabe Ervin is better than AJ Allen and Anthony Grant and Ramir Johnson. I just until I see that actually play out on a football field in an actual game, it just feels like it's a spring deal to me. And I will continue to buy whatever stock people sell of AJ Allen because they watched a 5-second clip. Like I'm buying that stock. That's me over here, just getting rich while you guys are getting poor.
Yeah.
So spring deal for me.
Okay.
All right, wide receiver. Isaiah Garcia Castaneda's new outlook on life. Big deal, spring deal, no deal.
No deal.
All right.
He's got another. I mean, he got an opportunity, a second chance. I don't know that. I think he's going to be fine. I don't think that his new lease on life. I don't know. Like he's going to be productive. I thought he would have been productive last year if they would have.
He was for a game and a half, and then he just never resurfaced until he went into the portal.
I find it hard to believe that he's just going to be a European flash in the pan. Like I'm expecting
European Marcus Fleming.
Yeah, I'm expecting things from him. So I don't think it's a huge deal, but I think he'll be okay.
I'm with you that I don't think it's a huge deal, but I do think that there's a chance he could be one of your two best wide receivers, at least in terms of production. Like I mean, when he played last year, he was able to produce. We saw that he has the ability to go up and get the ball. I continually say this, and people roll their eyes, and I get it. But when Minnesota and Iowa State want you to come play wide receiver, those are two schools in the Midwest where I'm like, all right, I'm on board with this. So I continue to think there's more for Isaiah Garcia Castaneda. All right, tight end. Thomas Fidone is healthy. Big deal, spring deal, no deal.
Well, based on your thing that you just said about Gabe Ervin, it's a spring deal, right? Like until you see it, like he's
no. This is a big deal.
Okay.
We have never been to this point of spring with Thomas Fidone healthy and ready to go. He's going to participate on Saturday. That's a big deal.
Here's what I think is a big deal with him. He's the kind of guy that just like an attitude perspective, you can build around. And like, I think that to me is a huge deal. I do think if he can stay healthy, if Eric Gilbert gets his waiver, that tight end group is going to be scary.
Scary.
That's probably a spring deal, is saying that the tight end group is going to be great in the fall. But I think that group has potential that they have not had at that position for quite a while.
Wow. And you pick these guys to be picks to click every week. So
I
don't
know
what's beyond that. Are we going to have a season MVP that's a tight end as predicted by Michael Bruntz?
Co-MVPs. Maybe three. Maybe three. They're
okay.
They're going to go three wide.
All right.
Yeah.
We're getting a little ahead of ourselves. So, okay, three of them. So you got Eric Gilbert getting his waiver, Thomas Fidone staying healthy. Is it Nate Borkircher or is it new Janiron Bonner?
I'll go with Borkircher. I think he's got breakout potential.
Okay. All right. I'm excited. I think this is a big deal. Healthy Thomas Fidone. Here's the other thing that I think is big in this. He's still here. I don't know if people are aware that could have played out a lot differently in December. He was very affixed to the Scott Frost staff. He really liked Sean Beckton. He liked Scott Frost a lot. He chose to come here and it hadn't gone well. It would have made all the sense in the world if he would have been like, you know what, I need a fresh start. I need to go somewhere else. And he's still here. And not only is he still here, he is one of the most competitive people on that team. And that was evident by the fact that he was an off-season captain. They had him get up there and speak. This is a guy who works all the time. And I think Nebraska is going to benefit for that. And he's going to benefit for that. And I'm really excited to see that play out. Offensive line. Brice Benhart reshaped his body, Better pass blocker, says teammate. Big deal, spring deal, no deal.
It's a spring deal. We'll see if it happens in the fall. I'm in wait and see mode there.
Yeah.
What is not up for debate is he has dramatically reshaped his body.
Yep.
I mean, he walked through the concourse a couple weeks ago, and we were like, "Wait, who is that?" Like, it didn't even look like him. Matt Rule says he's an NFL guy. That perks your ears up a little bit. But I need to see that, I think, on in Minneapolis or Boulder before I believe it. So
Yep.
I'm cautious there. I'm not gobbling up the stock like you are with your AJ Allen pick there.
Yeah, this is a spring deal for me as well. I mean, I would say that I'm cautiously optimistic, partly because when you can see a physical change the way that you have, you hope that maybe plays out. And I think, the biggest thing for me with Brice Benhart has always kind of been a mentality. He's always talked about how he has to be more aggressive. And I don't know that that's a thing that you can just be, have instilled in you. But if he gets refined technique to go along with kind of a reshaped body and an emphasis in different areas, maybe he just needed, a new voice. And so, Donovan Raiola isn't necessarily new, but Matt Rule and that strength and conditioning staff are. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm with you. Spring deal.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Based on that, do you find it to be notable or a big deal that you have a head coach, an offensive coordinator, and obviously an offensive line coach, but everybody that has offensive line coaching experience? Does that matter to you?
It does, in the sense that line play, in particular trench play, was a hallmark for Baylor. And so I guess it gives me confidence on both sides of the line that, like, there's a certain style that Matt Rule teams have that I guess I kind of am transposing that Nebraska is going to have as well, because it seems like it's an expectation. And he builds his teams that way. So I'm already convinced that Terrence Knighton is not only going to be a good defensive line coach, I'm convinced that he's not going to be at Nebraska particularly long, because he's going to be that good of a defensive line coach. Like, he'll probably have an opportunity to go coach in the NFL pretty quickly. And they've already got their ready-made replacement to go with that. So I sort of view it where the defensive line and the offensive line, and I'm kind of, combining things here from your original question, but I just view it as this is one of the things Matt Rule has always done really well. And so I think it's going to continue because he has, a strategy for that. He has a plan, and he did it well at multiple different stops. Even in the NFL, it's not like the Panthers were the greatest offensive line or defensive line, but they were still, it was more of a plus than it ever was a minus for those two groups. And so, particularly at Baylor with the defensive line is really what stands out. But I feel like trench play is going to be so much better with this staff. Maybe not initially, but certainly down the line. So I don't know if that really answered your question or not.
No, it did. I asked Teddy Prohaska that this week, and he was like, you can tell just the way that coaches talk that they have an offensive line background. And I think that helps. Like, I think you call plays differently as a coordinator if you have that kind of experience too.
Didn't Rule talk about that? It's like he mentioned that was a thing he wanted Marcus Satterfield to experience.
That's right.
Working with the offensive line, because suddenly it gives you a new perspective for when you're calling plays about the positions that you're putting these guys in. We know that was not the thought process of a Mark Whipple. I'm not sure it was a thought process of a Scott Frost either. So, I think that could be helpful, certainly, for that group up front. Let's jump over to the defense. We'll hurry this along. I said it was going to be a shorter podcast. I always lie when I say that. So buckle in. Defensive line. I don't know that I have like a great question here, but let's put it this way. Nash Hutmacher hype. Big deal, spring deal, no deal. Feels like there's some excitement for Nash Hutmacher. He's in his fourth year, I think, now with the program, and is a guy that I think we've always known has physical gifts, but it hasn't quite translated onto the field. Now he's getting all of the reps, a lot of the work. He's got a new coach, a new defensive line coach, and he seems to be pretty bought in on everything. What are your thoughts on Nash Hutmacher this spring?
He also looks to have reworked his
Reshaped.
body.
Everybody looks different up top, right? Like, is that how
Yeah.
you would explain it?
Yeah, they're much more it seems a lot more, less bulky, I guess would be the best
Yes.
way to.
It's svelte is how I've been describing the 6'5", 325-pound guys.
Yeah.
Svelte.
Yeah, they're svelte. I'm still a spring thing
Okay.
with Hutmacher, and that's not a knock on him. He's another guy that it's like you kind of have heard it a few years. You need to see it, I think, to really buy in. So I will. He needs to be a big deal,
Yeah.
but we'll see if that holds true.
Yeah, I'm a spring deal with you on this one, in part because I think we heard a lot of the same things about Ty Robinson in the past, and Ty Robinson's been a very solid player, but he has yet to kind of be like a great player. And so I think I'm in that same boat with Nash Hutmacher. Like I expect him to be solid, but I want to see if he can be great. And so
Yeah.
that's sort of where I'm at with those guys in particular. All right, linebacker, second level, jack position. You got Jamari Butler, MJ Sherman talking all about pass rush. Do you believe it? Big deal, spring deal, no deal.
Feels like a spring deal. It's it feels like we're in the honeymoon period with a new scheme. Lets you play freer, not thinking as much out there, creating a lot of havoc. Um, get letting them use their athletic ability. I'm trying to think what else we've hit on in the past. I think there's a lot of potential in this defense to scheme up pressure, and I think that NJ Sherman is going to have a big role in that. Jamari Butler needs to kind of take that next step. He's a guy that in small doses has looked good in the past, but I think he's in for a bigger role. I think the fact that Nebraska kind of re-recruited him out of the portal makes it seem like they see a fit there at that spot. So I'm gonna stick with spring because it's I don't maybe it's just because we've had so many of these changes
Yeah.
that I think I'm not willing to just jump in and go along at this point.
I I like both of those guys a lot. I enjoyed interviewing each of them this spring. I'm almost like I'm closer to no deal than I am spring deal because I gotta see the pass rush. I have to see how it happens, where it comes from. We've spent a lot of time talking about this 3-3-5. We've spent a lot of time talking about the different positions in it. I am as excited for that on Saturday to just see what it looks like in different stretches than I am for about anything else. So I'm gonna go no deal with a slight arrow up to where it could be a spring deal. I gotta see it. I don't know. I understand MJ Sherman comes from Georgia and was highly regarded, but there's again a reason that he was available in the transfer portal. And
It,
Jamari Butler, we've talked about a lot, but there's a reason that we've only talked about him in the hypothetical sense and not in the, oh, that guy totally took someone's job sense.
so what you're expecting is that Nebraska's defense on Saturday is going to get after the quarterbacks like the defense in 2004 did against Joe Daly. They're going to get after them badly.
That'd be exciting. You know who got after the quarterbacks? The 2022 spring game defense. They absolutely destroyed Nebraska's offensive line. Garrett Nelson had like 7 sacks in that game by himself. I'm not looking.
They're going to be live though. They're going to have to finish the sack.
I know. I'm very interested in this against that svelte offensive line too. So
The Svelte Boys.
The Svelte Boys. That's the name for the guys up front. I'll run it by
Pipeline,
like
Svelte Boys. Yeah. Your choice.
I'd rather be the Svelte Boys. Everyone's a pipeline.
Like
no one else is a Svelte boy.
Bunch of guys wearing cashmere sweaters.
Why is it cashmere? Is that more thinning?
It feels svelte.
Oh, cashmere feels felt. All right. I didn't know that. Defensive back. I don't have a great question for you. Actually, I'll just pick out one player. Malcolm Hartzog. Big deal, spring deal, no deal. the idea of him moving to safety despite being relatively undersized as it is.
I think in Bo Pelini parlance, he's a good football player. I think he can do either. I think he's going to make plays anywhere. I don't think it's a big deal because I think he can play either place. Like there's not a ton of question in my mind
So
that
you're a no deal on this.
yeah, no deal. Yes. So I noted it in my notebook, and that's as far as it got. I'm not losing sleep over that move for Malcolm Hartzog.
I don't know that I'm losing sleep, but it does make me wonder a little bit. I mean, we did see DiCaprio Boodle play that. I just feel like you have to be scrappy and willing to mix it up. And I don't know if that's quite Malcolm Hartzog. He's been very good, hand fighting and everything as a defensive back. He's come away with interceptions. I don't recall him like stepping into the lanes of running backs and taking them down the way that you did with DiCaprio Boot. So I'm more of a spring deal on it, but I understand where you're coming from. He's going to play. Like, that's the thing. He's going to be somewhere on the field. Where he is, just remains to be seen. I don't have anything for the specialists. Do you have one that you want to throw in? I created all of this as we started the podcast, so that's why it's as professional as everything else we do.
I mean, it's hard with specialists because the competition isn't going to start till August.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's, one of the competitors is finishing up at Omaha West Side, so I don't really have much there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll just call that one to be continued.
Yeah. That's good.
All right. Let's take a timeout. We're going to come back. I'm going to talk some recruiting for a while. We'll get into the spring visit list, what we have confirmed. And I was down at an Under Armour camp over the weekend on Sunday and what I saw there. So we'll talk about that. Bruntz will get into a little baseball, all that when we return here at the Husker247 Podcast. So I was down in Kansas City for an Under Armour event, Bruntz, and Nebraska had several guys down there. The state of Nebraska, had several down there, including Caleb Pyfrom, Caleb Benning. You had Teddy Rizak. You had Isaiah McMorris, Davon Hall. They all made the trek down. If there's anybody I'm forgetting, I apologize. But those are the ones that Danny Kalen as well was down there. And Nebraska had a number of targets that were competing in this Under Armour camp. And I want to say several things here before I dive into stuff specifically. One, it sounds like this is going to be like a new permanent home for that camp. They had jumped around from Chicago to Columbus. They really like what they found in Kansas City. It's an area that allowed them to get players from Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, Kansas, kid from Colorado, I think made the trek as well. So I think because of its proximity to a bunch of different areas, I think that's a camp that's going to stand the test of time. My second thought is very much this. I hope that this staff, more than the previous ones, spends a lot more time in the Kansas City area. And there's too much talent there that Nebraska has not, landed. Bruntz, I don't know if Nebraska has added a player out of the Kansas City area on scholarship since the Davis twins. And that would be taking you back to 2015. No, Jaden Doss. Jaden Doss would be the first. Yeah.
Jaden Doss,
so that's a long gap in there. And there's a lot of talent. And one of the best players. So obviously, Williams Nwaneri was down there. He's a 5-star. There's talk that Nebraska could be getting an official visit. We'll see. I think they're kind of running 4th or 5th amongst the teams that he's truly looking at. The best player I saw in this entire camp was not him. It was his teammate, 2025 wide receiver Isaiah Mosey, whose dad is the head coach at Lee Summit North and played at Oklahoma. And so everyone's basically expecting Isaiah Mosey to go to Oklahoma. But there is a ton of talent in that area. So what I'm getting at is even if you're not going to land some of these guys, building those relationships is huge. Presenting yourself as an option in the portal, if that becomes a thing for them, is huge. They just need to really emphasize Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri, get into Missouri a little bit more. We can talk about St. Louis all we want until we're blue in the face. But frankly, they've dropped the ball in Kansas City. And so I hope that this staff does more work in that area. And quite frankly, there's a lot of talent in the Midwest. I mean, they're going to go and have their spots in Texas, and they're going to spot recruit different positions elsewhere. But they can have a lot of success bringing in kids from the Midwest. And I know that one of the tenets and goals for Matt Rule is to have this big camp series. If he can get 2026s and 2025s from the area states to show up, I think that's going to be really big. I'm very skeptical you're going to get a lot of juniors that are going to be there, or juniors to be seniors. But I do think there's a lot of talent in 2025, 2026 within a 5-hour drive to Lincoln, Nebraska. And so I'm very fascinated as to how the staff will go about attacking all of that. So that's just the overarching stuff that I wanted to get into. Individually, one player I didn't mention, he was also there, and he won defensive MVP for the linebacker spot, Christian Jones. At the time that people will hear this podcast, I think we'll have it out at 24/7. He's getting bumped in the ratings, even though he's going down overall in the rankings, which is going to be confusing for people, and we're going to have to explain it. And I'll just leave it at this. He got passed up by other people that were rated higher while also receiving a higher rating. So he's going to move from like 23 to, I don't know, mid 40s, early 50s. Not a big deal. But Christian Jones himself, big deal. I mean, this is a guy that can play coverage really well for a linebacker. He moves really well. He talked to me about how he could play the Will or the Jack or the Mike, and Nebraska's open to all of them because they're just going to see how his body grows. And they think he has the athleticism that he can handle any of those spots. He's coming out for the spring game this weekend. And so Christian Jones, I think Bruntz is going to be, the next sort of Carter Nelson, Von Dickerson, Caden Helms. I'm trying to think of guys, less Caden Helms, more Devon Jackson, guys that really, blew up at the national level. I think that's going to be Christian Jones. And so I think he is on his way in that regard. I'll run through a couple of these other guys and I'll throw some thoughts at you. Caleb Benning, he had a good camp. He struggled against Isaiah Mosey, but everybody did. And coverage one-on-one isn't necessarily where his strong suit's going to be as a safety. He's a guy that works really well with instincts. We saw it on Sunday. He had a couple interceptions. Every rep he had against Isaiah Hall and Davon Hall and Isaiah McMorris, Caleb Benning won. I don't think he allowed a single catch for those guys. I think he had 5 reps against the two of them combined, 4 or 5 reps. And so he's very competitive. And he was going against good wide receivers. And it wasn't a great day throwing the football, so that probably helped to a degree. But I think Caleb Benning's a really solid player. I think Kansas State is a school to kind of watch. I don't think he's a lock to Nebraska by any means, but he obviously has a good relationship with the staff. Isaiah McMorris, on the other hand, I would say things are looking better there. Oklahoma took a wide receiver commitment, I think might have taken his spot. We saw flips on the crystal ball to USC. USC is not really an option, I think, for Isaiah McMorris right at this moment, though he is very interested in that program. I just don't know that he can commit there. I think Nebraska can be circling here a little bit. Obviously, Penn State's another school that he likes quite a bit, but would not rule out the idea of Nebraska getting back in for Isaiah McMorris or for Davon Hall. He had, some nice things to say about Matt Rule. He's trying to build the relationship with this staff back up a little bit. I don't think he will be at the spring game, but he is planning on coming out at least a couple times over the summer, including an official visit. He had a pretty good camp. It was good to see him play well because he had I thought, kind of an underwhelming junior year. And so I thought he looked really good in that camp setting. If that translates in the fall, it would be really good for Davon Hall. Caleb Pyfrom, a guy that, feels a lot of love from Nebraska. The team that I think people have to watch out for isn't so much Iowa, Penn State. He's speaking really highly of Penn State. So for whatever reason, the Nittany Lions have Davon Hall and Caleb Pyfrom and Isaiah McMorris all quite interested in what James Franklin and Penn State are doing there. But he really likes the staff. He spoke a lot about Keith Williams, a guy that I think you've talked to, Bruntz. Keith Williams is getting really involved in recruiting, even though he's not an assistant coach. He talks more, I think, with Keith Williams than he does Donovan Raiola. So that could be an important relationship for Nebraska moving forward. Talked briefly with Danny Kaelin, he's obviously very excited about his commitment to Missouri. I don't think there's going to be any sort of kicking of the tires by Nebraska there. I think he's pretty well locked in. But that's kind of a quick rundown of everything. You have any thoughts, questions, concerns, comments?
Yeah, Caleb Pyfrom is the most interesting to me out of that group. I mean,
he's also bigger than I realized, by the way.
What those types of camp settings are always really tough to get a read on guys. I mean, you're going one-on-one with a defensive lineman and you're not wearing pads.
And there's no other lineman going. Like
right.
There's no help. It's just you. You know, it's a different for sure.
How did he move though? Like, does he for that size? Because that's the other thing. He was at Jaden Lloyd's commitment announcement, and he walked in, and I was like, oh yeah, you're a lot bigger than I expected. Yeah. I mean, like, that's kind of the first reaction. But how did you feel like he kind of did with the athletic stuff there?
He was a right tackle during the one-on-one reps. And he didn't take as many as I would like to have seen him a few more, but he only took a handful. And the first one, it looked like he didn't quite have the footwork that he wanted, but he was still able to get his arm out and kind of prevent the guy from blowing by him and slowed him down just enough that he could get his body back to where he was. So he got a stalemate out of that one, even though you would consider it maybe a pressure from the end. It's hard to tell. The tackling dummy doesn't have any real pocket awareness. So he didn't like step up when he saw this guy coming, you know. So what could you do there? But on the other reps, I mean, he held his own. I mean, I think he can play right tackle. Like I don't think he could be a left tackle like just about everyone ever that Nebraska recruits. I think he's more long-term futures and probably more interior offensive line. But I think he can play college right tackle. And I think he moves pretty well. He's certainly someone that, you know, it's probably more raw than really refined right now, but just big guy. And the footwork after that first rep was pretty good. Like, he got his feet where they needed to be. I can't speak to the hand placement because I'm not that technical with it, but I know this. Alan True was really impressed, especially coming off the idea that, you know, Caleb Pyfrom hasn't been in a camp like this. Like, this setting is just different. And the guys he was going against have Power 5 offers as defensive ends. So it wasn't like he, you know, that's the thing. Sometimes these things are really good because they get a chance to go against talented people and you get to measure them against people that they're, you know, in the same recruiting pool with. So I thought that he performed pretty well and stood out in that regard. I don't know where we have him rated in state. I would bump him up to being one of the more important pieces that Nebraska can get. You know, I honestly, in this might be sacrilegious to some, I'd probably put him over the wide receivers. Like, if you're like Mike, if Nebraska could get Caleb Pyfrom or Isaiah McMorris, I'm probably taking Pyfrom. If you're Pyfrom or Davon Hall, I'm taking Pyfrom. You know, there's not for the 2024 group other than maybe Carter Nelson, and even that, it's a lot of projection. I would put Pyfrom up towards the top of the list of the importance of in-state players, just because, one, I think he's a pretty good offensive lineman. Two, he's going to be connected to some guys that are coming through that are going to be important recruits for you. And I think it would be a good win in Omaha from an optics standpoint, even more so than getting one of the Bell West wide receivers. So I think there's a lot of different reasons for this, but I regard Caleb Pyfrom pretty highly in this class.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think, well, I mean, and you just look at the way that Matt Rule's staff wants to operate. They want to be a very developmental program. And just the numbers or lack thereof at offensive line, that would be a big win. And I mean, if you were able to kind of pair him, you got Gibson Pyle in the class already. You're bringing in that group of Sledge, Knutson, and Mason Goldman. Who else? I'm blanking on that.
Gunnar Katula's already there.
Katula's already here. So you're kind of stacking those two classes of guys that are mostly regional recruits aside from Pyle. That to me seems like a core group that you can really kind of nurture and bring along together. So I'm with you. I think that's probably an important recruiting battle that maybe we're not talking about enough locally.
Yeah, I definitely think that's fair. And then in addition to that, there are also two guys that were there, Caden Massey, Kyle Rakers. Nebraska's in pretty good position for both of those. I mean, I think Kyle Rakers is the de facto replacement for Gage Ginther that was on their board. I mean, I think that they would bring him in to be an interior offensive lineman. He packed on about 40 to 50 pounds after talking with Donovan Raiola in the fall. And Rayola's like, we need you to be bigger or you'd be a center for us. And then he showed up the other day at Nebraska and they were pretty impressed by his ability to add that weight on. I mean, no one's ever been impressed when I put 40 pounds on in 5 months, but when Kyle Rakers did it, it moved him up on the board a little bit. And so
he was a salt boy.
Yeah, he was a guy that looked like he's been an offensive lineman for a while and was very comfortable. He had some of the more spirited fights going against Juju Marks and some other people that were down there in that Kansas City camp, but he was not afraid to mix it up, playing at the right guard spot. So Kyle Rakers certainly. And then Caden Massey, this is a big kind of recruiting battle in itself. He is a huge kid. I mean, he is basically a shade shorter than Teddy Prohaska, played at a low level in Kansas, is a future left tackle, very raw, struggled his first rep each time, would get some coaching, dominated the second rep every time. So I think there's a lot of enthusiasm, and I would not be surprised at all if he makes a big jump on 24/7. That is a Nebraska, Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma battle. All Big 8 schools. Iowa State's in there a little bit too. I'm sure there's some other schools. Either he's going to blow up like Carter Nelson and he's going to get a lot more offers despite where he plays, or he's going to be one of those really important regional recruits. And Nebraska, I think, is in a good spot to get an official visit. He wanted to come back for the spring game, but he's got a powerlifting competition, which, I don't know if the staff loves track. Maybe they love powerlifting too, and that's going to get them all fired up. But yeah, Caden Massey, a name to certainly know moving forward. I mean, he's obviously you'd love to get a Brandon Baker or somebody like that. More realistically, Caden Massey could be the left tackle in this class, but they have to beat out some really good teams to do it.
It's interesting, like when you go through the list of who you've talked about, and you also the list of prospects who are at that camp. Nebraska's done a really good job of getting a lot of those kids on campus this spring, and not just the big.
We're just offering them before other people. There's a wide receiver 2025 out of Oklahoma, CJ Simon. Alan True comes racing down the sidelines. He's like, the Nebraska offered this kid? And I was like, no. He's like, go watch him. He was really good. I mean, he's got Oklahoma State. Oklahoma, I guess, is going to get more involved now. It's going to be difficult, but the evaluation and everything early on for even the 25s and 26s, like they're doing some work back in that recruiting department right
now. Yeah, I've been impressed with what they've been able to do. Not even from the standpoint of just like big tentpole type recruiting weekends, because it was very impressive that they were able to get as many highly ranked prospects as they could on campus for that weekend with Dylan Raiola and that crew. But just the kind of steady trickle of guys who are high on Nebraska's board coming in for a Tuesday spring practice or stopping in for a random Saturday scrimmage. I think they've done a really good job there of kind of setting the table a little bit, even though I think in 24, they're still just a little bit behind.
Yeah, they definitely are. And they would tell you they are.
But I think they're getting closer, and I think they've done a really good job of making sure that guys get to Nebraska, see the coaches coaching, see what it looks like, rather than just doing the, hey, come for a random weekend, we'll take your picture wearing the jerseys and call and do it like that. So that stood out to me, that more with this staff, the amount of players who have just shown up for practice. I mean, it going to happen this week too with Cohen Eccles, the offensive lineman out of Texas. He gets an offer there. That's been kind of a recurring theme with this group so far this spring.
Yeah. Do you want to real quickly just run through the names that we have confirmed for spring visit lists, or at least a handful of them? You don't have to give them all away, but just tease the people with what we got.
Well, you already hit on Christian Jones. I think in terms of the 25 class, getting him back on campus, that's a big deal. And I agree with you. I think he's got the potential to be the type of prospect that after this spring, you're going to see even bigger national programs jumping in with offers for him once they get a chance to come in and see him. Beyond that, pull it up here. Maybe. This is great.
Scintillating podcasting right here.
By the way, you were talking about Kansas City. Before Jaden Doss, the last prospect that Nebraska got out of the Kansas City area,
Javion McQuitty? No, he was
Bo
Columbia.
Wilson.
Bo Wilson. All right.
All right. So among the other kind of bigger names, you've got Brandon Baker, who you mentioned, coming back again. He was here in March for that weekend. Willis McGahee the fourth, another obviously son of Willis McGahee, was here for a spring practice early in the spring.
Which Nebraska, I think, has a more than fighting chance as long as Miami doesn't come through with an offer.
Yes, I think that's fair. Carter Nelson, tight end in Ainsworth, that just finished up I think he hit almost every school in the SEC, it seemed like, on that trip. But he'll be back in Lincoln again. That feels like to me a situation where you follow the visits. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I think Nebraska's going to end up with Carter Nelson.
A couple other names of note. Makai, I believe it's Sena, but he four-star offensive lineman at Arlington Martin. That's where Bob Wager coached. That's where Ismail Smith-Flores played. That's where Jeremiah Charles played. The two signees in the last class. They'll both be here for the spring game. I'm expecting a big group of signees to be on the sidelines per usual, but getting him here in Nebraska was in his top 10 that he released a few weeks ago. But getting the chance to kind of show off with all the Arlington Martin connections, that's notable to me. One other guy that kind of stands out, really athletic defensive back. We've got him as a four-star at 24/7 Sports. Peyton Morgan out of Central Texas. He's going to be up. I think he's a guy that kind of comes from that area around Waco, that's familiar with Matt Rule and kind of what they were able to do at Baylor. He's an interesting one to me as well. There's more on the list that we have at Husker 24/7, and will be many, many more additions over the next few days as these lists tend to do.
All right. Let's give you a few minutes to talk about Nebraska baseball, which did not complete a game with Creighton last night. The Huskers have 3 runners on base, which is the most runners you can have on base. They have no outs, which is the least amount of outs that you can have.
Yes.
And it is in the 8th inning when play resumes on May, whatever. Bottom of the 7th. When play resumes May, whatever. So, yeah, that felt like it was scripted. The entire thing, Nebraska battling back. They finally have a chance to take a lead in this game, and then a big lightning strike, and it's over.
It's what's kind of crazy is, like, if you had one more batter, like, that game is probably over. Creighton's fine with that game being 5-4, heading home and just being done with it. Like, for both of these teams, there was, like, aside from just beating a rival, there was absolutely no benefit to that game going 9 innings, and they stopped it. And Creighton headed for the bus. They waited till 10 o'clock, and now they're going to. Nebraska says it's going to be at a date to be determined. They play again May 9th in Omaha. I would expect that you'll probably get a resumption of the game then. So, but yeah, I mean, just, Nebraska fights back. Brice Matthews hits an absolute bomb.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
And as emphatic as a bat flip as I can remember by a Nebraska player. Is that fair to say?
He threw it across the diamond, right?
He kind of like chucked it.
Like he's a right-handed hitter.
Yeah.
He hits it. He watches it. He's going down the first baseline, and then he throws it across his body, which would go over through the diamond to the other side. That in itself was, a lot of times teams are in the visitors box, and so you just toss it towards your teammates. I mean, it was quite the bat flip. Yasiel Puig would have been impressed.
Yeah, he didn't do like the Korean baseball, like kind of
Let it fly,
let go, and then just kind of like tomahawk it. That's always my favorite. But yeah, so Nebraska fought back. Game's tied. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, the midweeks for Nebraska's purposes at this point are kind of immaterial. Nebraska's
they need to win them.
Yeah, but I mean, they got to win them, but it doesn't really do anything RPI wise for you. Like there is and has been this way for a few weeks. Nebraska's going to be very RPI challenged.
Yeah,
like there's a chance that they could win the Big Ten regular season and would still be probably outside the bubble for an at-large NCAA tournament bid, just because of the way that the schedule is broken. Certainly, losing the early season non-conference games don't help you, but strength of schedule is such an important metric for RPI, and it just has not worked in Nebraska's favor. Like even the games that would help you in the conference, Nebraska's not playing this year. Like you don't get Rutgers, which I mean, it's funny. Like Rutgers and Michigan State would be helping them so much right now in RPI, and you're not getting either of them. Same with Indiana. That's probably going to end up being like a top 35 RPI team. So it's going to be tough. But it's a fun team to watch play. I mean, they've got three guys that have hit 10 home runs. Brice Matthews and Max Anderson seem like they're just trying to top each other in terms of the way that they're hitting right now. I mean, both players are legitimate contenders for a potential triple crown within the Big Ten batting races, which is kind of wild. But yeah, I mean, they just have to continue to stack wins and hope that the resume looks okay. But that RPI number, they're going to be dragging around like a boat anchor for most of the rest of the season.
There's still like 15 games left?
At least.
So what? And it's crazy because Max Anderson is having no less of a great season, and I always focus on Brice Matthews. But what's the most comparable season to what we're seeing these guys do? I mean, you have to go back to what, 2004 Gordon?
Yeah. I mean,
like we're just invoking Alex Gordon.
I know.
The type of year that two guys are having on Nebraska's team.
You don't want to do it, but I mean, that's probably the best comp. And, by the way, Brice Matthews has stolen, I think 14 or 15 bases.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's Nebraska's leading home run hitter, aside from Scott Schreiber hitting 18 in 2018 during the Big Ten era, has never been higher than 10. And they've got three guys right now who are at or above that number.
And it wouldn't shock me if someone goes past that 18 either. I mean, Brice Matthews is at 14 right now. 13?
13, because that game's not official yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
they forced him to finish that game out so he can have his 19th home run.
Give him his home run. Yeah, I mean, Max Anderson's hitting 417. Matthews is hitting 409. OPS for Anderson is 1291. For Matthews, it's 1322.
Insane.
Like I don't know that people really understand how impressive. I mean, and Brice Matthews has an on-base percentage of over 500.
Yeah, it's incredible. And like everyone, I understand he strikes out. And I certainly defensively, he has not been good. I think he's the only option they have at shortstop, or otherwise he'd probably be playing somewhere else or DHing. But the on-base percentage, like half of the time he goes to the plate, he's on base. You just talked about his ability to steal. If he walks, he can make it a double for you in some situations. Like it's just even his single the other day was just roped through the middle of the diamond. Like everything he's doing right now is super impressive. We're probably talking about someone that's going to get drafted in the top, I don't know, 8 rounds when we get there. I mean,
he hit a double the other day against Northwestern that went to right center field, and I think it was like 107 or 108 off the bat. Like it did not get very high, and it like one hopped the wall in right center at Haymarket Park, which that's not a small thing. Like it's been impressive, and both of them. I mean, Brice Matthews through most of his career has been a relatively streaky hitter, both for good and for bad, and both he and Max Anderson have just. I mean, they've basically been on a tear since the season started.
Well, and this should make, and I understand that Will Bolt is, hearing it from the fans about the lack of wins against Omaha and Creighton and everything else. But this should make fans feel pretty good about what the development possibilities are for these guys. I mean, look at Brice Matthews 2 years ago versus what he is now. Max Anderson didn't have the greatest sophomore year after having a nice freshman debut. Obviously, you got to come in with some talent, but they have figured out ways to optimize these swings, and they're clearly doing really good work with them in the offseason, that they are just assaulting these pitchers. And I understand that, it's not like there's a ton of great pitching prospects throughout the Big Ten, but I mean, Matthews has hit pretty much everybody he's faced, even going back to the non-conference. Same with Anderson. Like I'm super impressed by what we've seen from these players.
Well, I think what they've offensively, I think, last year was a struggle. There's no question about that. I mean, they're as a team hitting almost 100 points higher than they did last season. But I think what they figured out, and I mean, they've known this, but I think actually reconfiguring your roster to allow it to happen is kind of difficult to do. But they knew that they needed to get older in the offseason. And I think what you've seen too is you've seen guys like Matthews especially benefit from the guys who are hitting around him. I mean, Casey Burnham in the 9 spot, he was hitting in the 9 spot for a large portion of the season, has an on-base percentage that's almost as good as Matthews in the 9 spot. So there were RBI opportunities, and Matthews was able to take advantage. And all of a sudden, you've got Gabe Swanson and Garrett Anglim hitting behind Max Anderson, so you can't pitch around him as much as you could in the past. And I think that's been maybe what's it's been a key for both of those guys, is that I think as a team, the hitters around those two have gotten better, and those two guys are benefiting from that as well. So, there's going to be a lot that they're going to have to replace going into the next season. I mean, I'm not expecting that you're going to see Brice or Max back. And those are going to be big shoes to fill. But, I think with a mix of development with young guys, finding the right guys on the portal, I think you can kind of reload a little bit faster than, in the past with Nebraska. It always seemed like you'd have a really good year, and then you would kind of need another year to bring guys along. That's kind of like the Big Ten model. And I don't think you have to do that as much anymore now with the portal, and certainly with JUCO recruiting too, which I think Nebraska can take advantage of.
All right, Bruntz, what's next for Nebraska baseball?
So they've got 3 on the road against Iowa this weekend. Iowa, who knocked off LSU early in the season, has struggled in Big Ten play. They actually lost a midweek to Illinois Chicago, I think, last night. But on Friday, they're going to see Brody Brecht, who's one of the bigger arms in college baseball, let alone the Big Ten. He'll get close to 100.
Football. There's only focus on baseball.
Yeah. He's going to get close to 100 with the fastball. He's got a good slider. He's also been gettable. Like, he's effectively wild. So if Nebraska can have a little plate discipline, I think they should be able to handle things. But this is an important series for Nebraska in terms of conference standings. It was going to be a bigger one RPI wise. It's a road series against a top, I think, 60 RPI team. So it matters for sure. So they've got to definitely win this one, win this series.
All right. I promised a short podcast, and you got an hour out of the Husker 24/7 duo today. Brian Christopherson will be back joining us. We're going to have a hype cast on Friday. Probably won't have a guest. It'll probably just be the 3 of us. I'll tell Bruntz he's not allowed to talk about the tight ends, but he'll still figure out a way to work them into the discussion. And we'll get you ready for the up-and-coming red-white game on Saturday. Be sure to check out everything we got going on at Husker247.com. Before then, we'll be back on Friday. For Michael Bruntz, I'm Mike Schaefer. We're Husker 24/7. We'll catch you later.